Welcome to Words Do Things, a podcast about the powers and limits of language. I'm Dr. Serena Higgins, and I'm interested in the ways words make things happen. Join me as my guests and I explore language that is helpful, harmful, magical, or masterful, and learn how to wield words beautifully yourself. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners and viewers, and welcome back to what I think is the penultimate interview in the Bad Words series. I have the very great honor of having as my guest today, Dr. Taylor Jones. Welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
So glad to have you here. He is a linguist and a culture and leadership consultant. He is the managing partner at Culture Point LLC, a firm that specializes in leadership and organizational performance, but he is better known, and known to me, from his YouTube channel about language and culture called Language Jones. So sorry if I think your first name is Language sometimes. I'm sure it happens.
It happens all the time.
Yeah. He holds a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, where he studied under Bill LeBove, and he has published extensively on language, variation, and change, including high-impact work on non-standard dialects in the courtroom and on slurs. He holds the dubious honor of being one of the world's 5 experts on the N-word. So welcome very much, Dr. Jones.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
And I gather that you grew up speaking Black American English, right?
Yeah, so that's, I'm an Army brat. I grew up moving every 2 years, and there's sort of 2 different factors there. One is that the Army speaks Southern American English and Black English. And the other is, and also the DoD schools are the most integrated of all the schools in the U.S. The other is just living in Black speech communities. So it's a language variety that I am very comfortable with. It's what I hear when I go outside. I live in Harlem and have for a long time. And it's a language variety that I grew up navigating and thinking in, and I only learned when I was about 27 that not everybody actually understands it, and they're not just pretending to be kind of dismissive and rude.
And that's incredibly important in all kinds of contexts, like especially in the courtroom, right? I mean, if someone doesn't understand what the defendant is saying, for instance, massive implications could result. So is that some of the work you do, is essentially translating between language varieties?
In some cases, yeah, it's interesting because I'm sort of against translating in the courtroom because it is a variety of English. I'm co-authoring a descriptive grammar of Black English with Dr. Hiram Smith, and that one is one of the things that we talk about is why we say Black, why we say English. Typologically, it's English. It just has more features. It has more grammatical bells and whistles, so to speak. And if you don't understand those, it really can create problems. And one of the things I see is judges, lawyers will misunderstand what was said and then use that to build a case. Some cases it's the linchpin of their entire argument.
Hit the linchpin.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice choice of words. Yeah, maybe we'll get into some examples. So you do all these things together. You're a linguist, you're a teacher,
Yes.
you're a consultant. You want to just give us sort of an overview of what your jobs are?
Yeah, it's all related. It's all language. It's all culture. So I got the PhD in linguistics when I was already working for a consulting firm that does leadership and performance and culture, and everything was about understanding unconscious biases, cultural communication styles, like how we actually interact with one another on a deeper level. So how do you actually achieve high performance in an organization? The way that you do that is you have to manage your people, and your people are going to think differently than you and speak differently than you, and you have to actually navigate that. So a lot of stuff around DEI and all that, like, the idea is like you are celebrating people's cultures, but it's not actually understanding cultural depth. So we kind of limit it to music and food and Taco Tuesdays and all that stuff. But what we really need to understand is like direct versus indirect communication, high versus low context communication styles, positive and negative orientations towards face, how you think about managing time, what you think about relationships versus task. Like all of those things are where it's really interesting. And so I went into linguistics after probably 7 or 8 years off between undergrad and grad school. I'd worked as a jazz musician for a while. I'd worked at Rosetta Stone studying languages, and I knew that I wanted to look at how we do things with language. I actually initially went to grad school for pragmatics, and specifically game theoretic approaches to pragmatics, which is a whole world. Robin Clark is sort of at the forefront of that. He's fantastic. I ended up writing my dissertation on regional variation in Black English, in part because I just noticed things that I thought people had already documented and written about, and they hadn't. So it was like in my first year in grad school, people were saying things like, that's not true, and we'll prove it. Okay.
That's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, they were saying things like Black English has, there's one accent for Black Americans. There's 40 million people spread out across, however many square miles, 5,000 or something. And it's an insane assertion to make.
Yeah, I'm no linguist, and I know that's BS.
Well, you can put Kevin Hart, and I used the example in my dissertation proposal defense. I was like, here's Kevin Hart speaking, here's Ryan Coogler speaking. Do they sound the same to you? If they do, that's something about dialect perception and race, and not actually about linguistics. And any linguist should be able to hear some pretty dramatic differences in how they speak. Yeah. And that was, it went pretty well. It was a little contentious for a moment, but it went pretty well.
They gave you the degree in the end?
They ultimately conferred the degree, yeah.
Right. So now you have a much larger audience than the average academic through your YouTube channel that's, almost at 300,000
It's just shy of it. So if you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this, go check out Language Jones, and let's see if we can make 300,000. It is absolutely insane to me. It started as a blog in grad school, and then I thought, it'd be nice if people could hear some of this stuff, because there's certain things where it's hard to write, and not everybody knows the International Phonetic Alphabet. And somehow this has ballooned to hundreds of thousands of people and getting stopped on the street pretty regularly, which is it's great. It's also a little unnerving because I never know exactly why somebody's stopping me on the street. They can just kind of look, and sometimes it's, a slur might follow, and sometimes it's like, I know you from YouTube.
You don't shy away from the controversial topips either. You get into, are there sex differences in language learning? You get into colonialism and racism in linguistics, and a lot of that. You sometimes take down some of the standard assumptions in the field.
I appreciate that. I try to model rationalism, empiricism, having a calm conversation, seeing the humor in things, and being able to talk about all of that. And I think the idea, like my ideal scientist, is somebody who can form a hypothesis about the world, go out and test it, really try to knock down their own ideas and prove themselves wrong, and think through things rationally, but be open to different arguments, different perspectives. Same thing like with the views on culture, like different assumptions and different ways of looking at the world. And part of that means that sometimes, if you're really into pronouns, you start seeing how when everybody's arguing about pronouns, it doesn't have much relation to anything that we know empirically about pronouns, no matter what side of the argument you're on. And, we might benefit from actually being able to like say something a little bit more clearly about what we're even talking about, and evaluate our own ideas in the light of some more empirical and rational, observable data.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question about pronouns.
Yeah.
When somebody introduces themselves, or himself or herself, or whoever else self, they often have a slash in it. Say like, my pronouns are she, her. And the slash means, in the nominative case, my pronoun is she, and in the objective case, my pronoun is her. However, there are people who are happy with two separate sets of pronouns, and so that person might say, my pronouns are she/they. But they're using it to say, these are two nominative case options available to you. Am I right? Is that how people are using it? And that super annoys me because it's not parallel.
Yeah, you want it to be she, them.
Yes.
So here's the thing. There's no.
Why do I need to say she, her? Why can't I just say my pronoun is she, or my pronoun is her? Because people can then wait. It's not conjugate. What do you do with pronouns?
Decline.
People can decline pronouns.
Joke here.
Right? Yeah. But people can decline. So why do I have to say she, her? Like, if I say she, they can decline it. Therefore, if I said she, they, everyone would know I'm giving you two nominative options. Decline as suitable.
Yeah. And if you said she, them, there's an implicature there that you actually want them in the objective.
Right. I want she if you're using the nominative, and I want them if you're using which should be like, that brain can't really do that on the fly.
There's a tension. There's a tension there because people want to get their identity out there and feel, I think, respected, or know that you're not going to respect them right off the bat. It's nice to sort of
figure out what space we're in.
Yeah. And then the other thing, though, is you're kind of navigating all this stuff because people don't really I mean, I've said this before, people don't really know pronouns. So why do we have two and not, what about, possessives? What
Yeah,
about reflexives? What about,
right.
you know, so what about in subordinate clauses? Do they change? Like they could, why not? So what about your relative pronouns? Like I very much prefer whom when, when it's in the
Mm-hmm.
objective and nobody says whom anymore.
Not
So,
nobody. There's a few other
well,
nerds.
there's dozens of us, but,
Dozens of us on the planet.
yeah, but I think the thing is there's this balance too of like giving the sort of minimum necessary information to be clear and not want to go through all of it, and then also avoiding these sort of implicatures. Like if I say she them, then you're going to think is she in the nominative, them in the oblique. If I say she they, you're going to go, oh, these are two sets and I can infer the rest.
Right.
Versus she her. I guess, I mean, I don't know, it feels weird to say like my pronouns are she, like my pronoun is she, and decline it as necessary. It's the kind of thing I probably would say, but it's
Yeah, because only
unusual,
one
I
is
think.
necessary for
Yeah,
the sentence.
infer the rest. The rest are left as an exercise for
Mm-hmm.
the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because what annoys me is that as a poet is that the slash is being used for two different things. In one case, it's saying
Yeah.
or,
Mhm.
you can use either she or they in
Mhm.
the nominative, or what do you say, the oblique?
Oblique. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know. I
That's fun.
accusative,
Okay.
the
But in the
dative,
other
like this.
case, it's saying not an or, but an
Yeah.
and. It's like she and her and
Yeah.
hers and herself and
Well, it's she or her in, depending on the scenario where a pronoun
it's
would
not
be
the
used,
same
but
kind of
whatever the
or.
case
It's
marking
not
is.
these are
No,
equal alternatives from which you may choose.
no,
Right. So
no.
that's what annoys me.
Yeah.
All right.
And the problem is if you say that, I mean, that's you're kind of stepping outside of the social function of I'm declaring what my pronouns are and how I want to be
Yes.
treated. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's hard for people to hear that, because I think a lot of academics, a lot of nerds, a lot of people who would kind of fixate on these things, who are like, it can be a pet peeve, but it doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean I'm not going to call you by the right pronouns. It just means like, can we clean up the style a
Yes,
little bit?
exactly. Well,
But
and I
you
got
say
accused
that,
of
and
being
they're like, you bigot.
yeah.
How dare you?
No, I'm talking about the grammar. I got accused
Yeah.
of being a prescriptivist recently, and that hurt. So anyway,
Oh,
as you
yeah.
often point out, if people are using the words a certain way, then the words
Yeah.
are used that way.
That's the
They mean that.
linguistics. Yeah, that's the descriptive empirical dogma. We can also still have feelings about it, though.
Oh, thank you.
Like like I said, I like whom, I use whom, and
Mhm.
nobody else. I mean, very few people do now.
Right.
And I can't impose it on other people, even if I want to say like my relative pronouns are who and whom. It's not
Oh,
going to
that's
happen.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. Yeah. Maybe
Even if you write it on your name tag. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I wanted to make a shirt, diacritics are my love language. But I was getting a linguist and I was like, you need to get as many of the diacritics in there as possible. And he wanted to
Yeah.
make it like actually correct. And so this just stymied the entire project.
Oh yeah. No, that's the problem with linguists, is we get very, very into the weeds.
You want things
And
to be
then-
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet you're not prescriptivist. Okay, we're on question number 1 on my list.
All right.
That's no problem. Would you just give the elevator pitch for your YouTube channel for those who haven't watched it, which shame on them. Hopefully they will now.
Yeah, sure. The YouTube channel is everything to do with language, linguistics, culture, and communication. And I try to approach things from having a sense of humor about the absurd and trying to explain things clearly. So one day might be what is going on with 6, 7 and the kids these days. And one day might be, what's going on with Duolingo, and one day might be what's going on. I have one coming up that's going to be what's going on with the ergative absolutive case marking in 25% of the world's languages, which a handful of people have asked about, and I'm gonna make it as clear and as entertaining and as interesting as possible. I have a reference to Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin and The Edge. If you remember that movie from the 90s where they're being hunted by a man-eating bear. So that's the kind of pitch. That's like, I look for what's interesting. One of the first ones I did that I still am really proud of, I should probably remake so more people watch it, was looking at politeness in Persian, which is probably really topical right now. But one of the ways that you signal politeness, linguists will say, oh, it's the difference between like a coronal and a coronal nasal. It's like a D and an N sound, which is true, right? And that's exactly how you would identify this kind of thing. But what's interesting to me is it's socially conditioned. So it is just like how formal or informal I want to be with you. Like it's like the tu and vous distinction in French. And what you're actually doing is lowering a flap in your head that allows air out your nose. So if I want to be like really friendly towards you,
you breathe on me more?
In Farsi, I just get more like air out my nose. And we don't really think about it in those terms, but when you take a step back, that's what's happening. And so I try to kind of bring all of that to the YouTube channel, and I never know what's gonna like really capture people's attention and what's really not gonna capture their attention. But it's I have fun.
And you try to do a lot of stuff about, like you said, scientific method, critical reasoning, that sort of thing, how to sort through misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah, and those videos never do well, but I keep making them.
Okay. All right.
How to think about like presuppositions and entailments and manipulation and all that stuff.
That's good. That's important work. So what exactly does a linguist do? Any misconceptions you want to correct?
First thing is linguists are not translators, even though the Army calls all their translators linguists. I love them. They do great work. They are not academic linguists. So linguists study the human faculty of language. That's language with a capital L. It is everything having to do with how language exists, how we process it in the brain, how it changes over time. And it's kind of this combination of a bunch of different fields that all coalesced. Really, modern linguistics coalesced in the 1960s. So you have semantics and sort of philosophy of language. You have a lot of the sort of scientific advances, and recording allowed us to study phonetics more accurately and more easily. Computing really helped with that. You have language variation and change, and again, statistics and computing all has really dramatically changed the landscape there. It used to be, you have a French guy, I think Swiss French, Jules Giron, who rode his bicycle around France for a few years and went town to town and asked people to say words and then like notated how they said them and built this incredible atlas. That's not a job that really exists anymore. Much as I wish it did. Maybe we should apply for a grant. But all of this stuff gets kind of folded in. Chomsky has this sort of cognitive revolution in linguistics, and it's like, what is going on in the brain as we are acquiring a language, and how does that differ from learning a language as an adult? So there's a lot of really interesting things that linguists do. I have published on slurs. I've published on grammatical change. So one of the ones that I'm really proud of was a working paper that I published on negation in Black English, where you have the word ing, which is a phonological reduction of even, but it does some really interesting things where it's pronounced in a particular way. So it's pronounced eem or ing, depending on what follows it. And it's only used in negation and non-vertical context. So it seems like it's become the sort of grammaticalized marker of non-veridicality, which is basically negation, and then also where we might use a subjunctive, like before I even say that, like before I even do that, that kind of thing. But it doesn't reduce in like even numbers or like even, Dave was at the party or whatever. So it's kind of an interesting little thing.
That is cool.
That's the stuff that I love. So that's that. Other linguists look at syntax, which is sentence diagramming on steroids. There's lots of stuff.
Sweet. Yeah, I think my old English professor wrote a whole paper on the letter R.
R is incredible.
R is such a wild letter or sound or phoneme or whatever you call it. What do you call it?
Yeah. I'll say the letter R, but it covers so many different sounds, and they're all related in very weird ways. That's a combination of sort of phonoacoustic things and also physiological things. So the fact that we consider like ra and the same thing as ra, which is also more or less a vowel, it's a very interesting domain.
This part of the episode brought to you by the letter R.
The letter R.
Yeah. So a linguist is not the same as a person who goes around learning dozens of languages, although you happen to do that as well.
I do like that. I study a lot of languages. I actually did the least study of languages when I was doing my PhD in linguistics. I thought I was going to have more time, and it was just absolutely impossible. I tried to study Zulu. I tried to study Old Chinese because there were people who teach those at Penn, and it was just not doable.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
and it's funny because most linguists don't speak a lot of languages. They get
Right.
offended if you ask how many languages they speak.
Right.
Like, it's like
It should
asking
be
a
more
physician
like,
how many diseases he has.
ah, that's funny.
Yeah.
I like that, because it's more like studying the underlying structures, the
Yeah.
evolution, the construction, the uses of, as you said, language with a capital L. So let's get into a couple of terms. We have to be careful here because obviously you could and probably have done like hour-long videos on each of these. But what's
I'll
a
try to be fast.
language? What's a language?
So a lot of these questions are going to be, it's really hard to nail that down.
And linguists probably have fist fights in the back alleys outside of conferences.
We have like a pithy little saying that Max Feinreich coined, which is a language is a dialect with an army and a navy, which is truer than is comfortable.
Yeah.
And you look at things like Bosnian and Serbian and Croatian, and like, are those three languages? Well,
but then what's a dialect?
Well, it's a dialect. It's not a language, right? So I think linguists kind of step around these by saying like language varieties and linguistic varieties. But that's to my mind, when we use language sort of informally, it's this sort of conceptual thing where it's like it's sort of fuzzy around the edges. But like I think we can all kind of agree on what is French for the most part. And then there may be some weird stuff happening in Quebec or, in the cités in Paris or wherever that like maybe is on the edges of that, but that sort of core, we can all agree, okay, that's French. So that's, you get into that with language. It's very different from, say, German, which has its own bajillion different dialects. The European traditions have this idea of dialect as being a sort of local language variety that's subsumed under a sort of superordinate language that is the language of administration, of the judicial system, of the schools. So you have these kind of two codes that you navigate between, and you use them throughout your day and day-to-day life. You navigate both, but you might use one at home and you might use one at school. And I think it's a pretty good way of looking at things. They're also related, right? Like it's not, completely different languages. They have the same sort of shared ancestry, but one has social and political hegemony and one is kind of looked down upon and stigmatized, but they're both very, very closely related and descendants from the same previous sort of iterations of linguistic use.
Okay. I mean, we all do that code switching to some extent. The way you and I are talking right now is not the way we write in our academic peer-reviewed papers. We use an entirely different vocabulary, to some extent, a different syntax, right? We'll speak in much longer sentences right now than we would use in a piece to publish. But
for sure,
those differences are probably not extreme enough to be a dialect, right? They're just registers of English.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person. So when you start getting into things like Black English, then you have this question of like, this is really a different dialect where you have to, in academic writing, not use the full range of tenses and aspects and moods that you have at your disposal. There's, I think, one really famous paper where Geneva Smitherman published it ostensibly in Black English, and there's sort of stylistic things going on there as well. But one of the things people say is like, well, if it's a real language, then why don't you publish papers? And I'm like, that's actually that's a valid question, but it's also hard to do. And there's a sort of format, like you learn academic writing, and we all agree that this is academic writing. And if you don't play the game of academic writing, then your peer reviewers are going to say, what are you doing?
Well, and there's a whole massive racial ethnic history going on there. There's 100%. A whole gatekeeping. There's who made the institutions, who painted the lion, tell me who, and who says what you're allowed to use, and who is on the editorial boards.
It's not like Black English is valorized at HBCUs. So they have diction classes still to this day at places like Howard, and it's not valorized. So it's not like if you like there's a parallel academic sort of market where you can just use habitual be or stressed been or any of these sort of grammatical categories. It's still very much like there's the academic register of the language, and then there's everything else. Arthur Spears is a linguist. He talks about African-American Standard English. And I think Martin Luther King Jr. giving a speech is the sort of ideal example, the Platonic ideal of African-American Standard English. It's clearly Black. It's also a very high register.
Okay.
Literary
so it's the same kind of, it's the same kind of way you and I have these whole ranges of the white English that we're using right now, the American, very specifically American, and even like Northeastern sort of type of English that we're using right
Yeah,
now.
I'm a bit more of a chameleon. It's kind of kludged together, and I try to suppress a little bit of the Southern English that really shaped a lot of my childhood, and I had to unlearn.
Is that for academic reasons too? Is that for passing in the academic world as well?
Yeah, social
Does that have to
stigma.
do
I
with the
mean, listen, when I
yeah.
moved from Texas to Virginia, the Virginians were like, "You got a Southern accent, boy."
I mean, seriously, like I lived in Waco for 6 years for my PhD, and
Yeah, it's a different.
University Parks Drive there, or UPD, is you pay day.
Yep,
And the
you pay
realtor was
day.
talking to us about the hail damage on our roof, and I was like, "Yeah,
Oh,
the hail damage, the hell can do serious damage to your roof if you're not
you're
careful."
gonna draw it out of me if I'm not careful.
That's fine, no problem. So this one is even worse. What's a word?
Yeah, we don't know. That's a great question. We don't really. I like definitions that are based on sort of like a phonological domain lining up with a morphosyntactic domain.
Whoa,
But
so many words there. Could you
yeah, I
unpack
know.
that?
What we do know, let me put it this way. What we do know is that it's not the spaces around written letters. That's a convention, and that breaks
Yeah,
down
some
across
languages don't
languages.
have
And
it or didn't have
yeah,
it.
some don't have it. Some languages just don't put spaces around like noun compounds, like German. Like a streetcar stop is what, 3 words in English, and Straßenbahn Hauptplatz is 1 word in German. Like it's there. It's
German.
so the one of the ways that people look at it is like prosody, which is the rise and fall of your voice. What counts as like one sort of sound unit, and they figure that out from intensity, from stress, from pitch accents. And then how does that line up with morphology, which is like the building blocks, the meaningful blocks of words? It can be a syllable or less or more. And then the sort of syntactic unit. So like, is this a noun phrase? Is it an adjective? But it's highly contentious, and I don't think something.
Right.
I mean, there's a paper in language within this last year.
Yeah,
that was looking at like the lexicalist hypothesis. It just like, it really breaking our concept of grammatical categories having to do with words.
Is that the one where an entire sentence can be a word such as, "And now in other elementary school teacher in Florida finds alligator cooking meth in her kitchen news"?
Yeah. It's a you'll know it when you hear it category.
Right.
So when you'll hear it is behaving like an adjective, right? It's doing adjective things, and that it comes before the noun. It's modifying the noun.
There is why I'm sad about the extinction of the hyphen, because I want hyphens all through that whole darn thing, so that it's serving as one.
When that works for writing. But I mean, all these things, one of the things that people have a hard time with when I talk about it is that writing is a technology, that a lot of punctuation is relatively new. I mean, vowels are relatively new in the long, like in the long view. It's sort of the great scheme of things. Writing with vowels is relatively new. Writing with spaces is relatively new. Commas and like all that stuff is we're kind of working out how we represent prosody and pitch and the sounds of speech in writing. And it's, when do I pause? Oh, okay, let's add a comma. Then there's a pause there, right? And then you can start to say, oh, well, what pitch goes with I'm pausing here? But it's not really inherent to the language. I mean, most languages don't have a writing system.
Still, most?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's like 7,000 languages in the world. And if you ask people, probably more. If you ask people how many languages there are, I mean, they're thinking like national languages that have like an academy or whatever. They're thinking Mandarin Chinese and French and Spanish, whatever. And like,
so thinking maybe 200 max, something like that. But
yeah, they're not thinking about like there's 200 languages in like Eastern Kenya alone. Right? Like it's what do we even mean by that? But that goes back to that question of what is a language? Is it? I think mutual intelligibility is going to be a part of that answer as well, right? Like once you can no longer understand one another, even asymmetrically, we're like, I can understand you, but you can't understand me, then they're definitely different languages.
Okay. So let's move to another word that's a little closer to what I've usually been doing on this podcast, which is what is rhetoric?
Rhetoric is not where I spend a lot of I guess I do spend a lot of my time there on YouTube now, but it's
you use it for sure.
Persuasion, right? It's how you use language. It's sort of applied pragmatics. Pragmatics is how you do things with language, the study of it. Rhetoric is, I think, actually engaging in that to change hearts and minds.
Hmm. Okay, well then, so this question might seem to be a little random, but it has a purpose here for the overall what I'm doing with this show. If you care to share, are you involved in any religious or political organizations or activities?
Yeah, you can go to my comments and find out. Like, people are very aware
Hmm.
of my hats. Yeah, I'm a Jew.
Okay.
That's so that's you talk about organizations, peoples, nations. I don't know, but yeah, I am Shomer
Does
Shabbos, Shomer Kashrus, go to shul.
hmm,
Uh, you know,
do your
I
religious
I'm gonna code switch here.
commitments, yes,
This is where you
overlap
start getting
with?
to, like, are we speaking the same language when I
Are
say,
we?
I try to daven in a minyan every weekday, but definitely on Shabbos. So, like,
I knew one of those three.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I studied Hebrew briefly in high school and did like one semester in
It's a fun
undergrad.
language. Yeah.
Yeah, did translated a portion of the Bible, one of the bits of Joshua.
Oh yeah,
Super
yeah.
exciting. Okay, do your religious commitments overlap at all with your work as a linguist or with politics, broadly speaking?
Yes,
Yes.
to both. So but I think there's something that's really important to clarify here, because I think a
Please.
lot of times when people think about Judaism, they think about it in terms of a religion, and the way they
Yep.
think about religion is predicated entirely on what they have the most experience with, which is Christianity and Islam, both of which are about sort of orthodoxy of belief, and with Islam, for instance, you state a belief and you are a Muslim, right? There's
Yep.
a formulation you can say, and then you are a Muslim.
You
You
say
might be
words
better or
and they
worse at
do
being it.
things.
Yeah, it's applied pragmatics. Um, so
That's not as
it's
catchy a podcast title. I don't think I'm going to change it to
right,
Applied Pragmatics.
right.
Sorry, but please go on.
You'll get a couple of undergrad linguists. With Judaism, it is not the same. You can't just declare yourself to be that. It doesn't work that way. And so it's what's called an am in Hebrew. It's a peoplehood, a nation. There is an entire history. There are foodways. There is culture. There is language. There is a associated set of religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs that people have, and practices that go along with those. But it is. I think we get sort of painted with the brush of like what people are familiar with. So if they're
Mhm.
familiar with Protestantism, then if they like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. But they're kind of projecting an imagined world onto a variety of different Jewish cultures.
Mm.
So my particular, I'm trying to translate hashkafa, my perspective, worldview, is well within the modern Orthodox movement, which is maintaining a continuity of Jewish traditions and Jewish peoplehood, while also engaging with modernity, engaging with science. Yeshiva University's whole thing is Torah umada, and Torah is Torah, Mada is modern secular science. So that's one part of it. I think there's an interrelationship there,
Mhm.
in how I approach language and linguistics. And I will say the handful of observant Jews doing linguistics are doing some really interesting work
I'll bet.
on things like Ugaritic, right? Like very, very cool stuff, which we only just kind of rediscovered in the 20th century,
Yeah.
in this massive trove of documents that were
Mm.
fired in the clay that they were in as Ugarit was burned to the ground by the Sea Peoples in the Bronze Age collapse. But there's also when you talk about, like, does it affect, like, what do you say? Does it affect me socially, or my social, like, how I
I
interact with
said
people?
politically, broadly speaking,
Politically,
but
yeah, I think politically, broadly speaking, it does, because some of my values, which I
mhm.
think of as progressive and sort of focus on both, individual rights and liberties, but also orientation towards community and what obligations we have to others, morally, if not legally.
Mhm.
Um, it shapes that, and then also, given the current political climate,
Yes.
uh, I mean, like I said, people project their assumptions. And so it's a lot of the Jews I know feel very politically homeless, because
Mm.
there is, the people, we agree on a lot of issues with, like, for instance, if you have people who agree on a lot of issues with the current mayor of New York, but he says some stuff that indicates strongly suggests, if not outright hostility, an ambivalence towards 20% of New York City,
Right.
and it's hard to feel like you can be all in there. I think it's the same thing for people on the right. I hear this from them where it's like they have complicated feelings, and I see with the war in Iran right now. I have tons of friends who are Persian who are not Jewish,
Mm.
and seeing the political climate in the US and the discussion of what's going on in Iran, it's just totally disconnected from the experience of Persian people and Iranians in Iran and in Tehran Jalis and in
Mm.
DC and wherever else. And similarly with Jews, with Israelis, which is not the same category. So there's a lot there, but I think usually it's
Yes.
from having a little bit more experience and a little bit more nuance and not neatly fitting into the narratives that kind of draw battle lines for people in terms of
Right.
their politics.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we're recording this on March 4th when
Yeah.
things are just heating up over there, or
Yeah.
just have been for several days. So the reason I ask, besides just being super interested in you and your background and what you think and all that, is that I've been so horrified by the public rhetoric, by the ways that people are wielding words. As you say, the battle
Yeah.
lines have been drawn, and that's often done through language, through
Oh yeah.
spoken or written words. So what have you seen words doing recently? Ways that concern you, things that,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
what do you
things
think
that
you want to
most
share?
concern me, I got this. So I have a good friend who is a cult survivor, and
Okay.
part of the process of deprogramming was learning about thought terminating cliches. And what I've seen words doing a lot lately is terminating thought.
Yeah.
That it's easy to fall back on slogans and just pigeonholing people into your worldview by repeating slogans at them. And I
Yes.
see this on both sides, and it's funny because I say both sides, but I feel like there's kind of 4 to 5 contingents in
I
the
have
US.
an episode
You
about
know,
that.
okay. But like thinking about like, for instance, I see people just chanting shame
Mm,
from Game of Thrones.
mm.
What is that? Right? Like, that's not a position. That's not an argument. That's not like that's a religious sort of practice. It's
Mhm.
not. It's not. I don't view it as like a political, as a politically engaged
Right.
form of activism. It's doing something else. And I see that I picked one, and people are going to say I'm picking on one side or the other, but like you see the same stuff on both sides or on all sides, and it's. I think that's the thing that's really frightening for me is you have the repetition of certain words and phrases, which is, I mean, Goebbels was famous for saying that you repeat the lie enough, it becomes the truth, or some version of that. I'm paraphrasing. Clearly, he didn't say it in English, so whatever, I'm good. And and you're seeing this over and over again with
Right.
TikTok, with YouTube. I mean, I'm on YouTube and I see YouTube Shorts. I'm like, oh, I'm getting the same phrases over and over again. And as a linguist, I'm aware of it. And I'm
Right.
thinking through, why am I seeing this? Am I seeing it because I'm engaging with it more? Probably.
Mhm.
But also, what impact does this have? And it's interesting when I talk to friends or family or people I'm friendly with and I can disagree politically with nuance, and I'll hear like more and more. I'll hear like we're having a conversation and they're thinking their way through things, and then boop, it's like the thought turns off and they're just
Right.
repeating a line that they've
Right.
heard over and over again, and it's horrifying. I'm deeply, deeply grateful to the people who are in my life who don't do that, or who, when they do that, are open to hearing. Hey, wait a minute.
Let's keep going. Let's go
Let's
through that
unpack that.
thought
Yeah.
terminating
What do you mean
cliche.
when you say that?
Mhm.
And that's a lot of times that'll shut down a conversation. And I love the people who will actually stop and go, what do I mean?
Yeah.
You know?
As a writer and as a writing teacher, I've often told people to avoid cliches because they just come across as white noise. Like I'll be reading someone's
Yeah.
writing, it'll be original, be interesting, and then they use a cliche and I hear,
Yeah.
but what you're saying is even more important. It's not just a rhetorical skill, an aspect of good writing. It's an aspect of thought and of conversation and even of community. So I'm trying to have these long, detailed conversations with friends on Facebook or Substack or wherever. And for instance, let's say on immigration, and I'll lay out these different points about like, well, here's how difficult it is to come in legally. Here's how coming in illegally is one of the ways to come in legally. All these different, here are ways that one can become illegal through no fault of their own. All these
Here's
things.
also the ways that we kind of benefit from a whole system where we kind of look the other way on illegal immigration, because we don't really want to be paying as much extra as we would be paying for, fruits and vegetables if we didn't, as a nation, kind of look the other way on illegal immigration when it benefits us in some ways. But then,
so whose fault is it then?
I had a conversation with somebody years ago who was like, they're identified on the left, they're saying I'm a Democrat or whatever, and they were all for immigration reform and for but it was for completely different reasons than people assumed. So the moment they said it, it was the problem. But the way they were looking at it was, we are taking advantage of these people and they don't have legal protections, and that needs to change. But nobody could get to that point because it was like
because that thought-terminating cliche comes in.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's like three particular people that they just keep saying over and over again, but they're criminals. It's wrong to break the law, but they're criminals. It's wrong, over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. I'm like, why are they criminals?
Because we've defined them as such.
Yeah. Is the law necessarily good?
Yeah.
What is the level of criminality? I wrote a long post about citations versus civil offenses versus misdemeanors and all those different things. And like, well, if they're criminals, you are too. I wrote a list of like 40 things that are misdemeanors that we all do every stinking day. Like starting a bonfire without a permit and all these things.
Every day?
Shh, don't tell. Hey, we got to do it when it's like 20 below.
The Arsonist is actually a really good podcast name. Just going to throw that out there.
Hey, that might actually get me more clicks. I have the power of the edit here. So that's what I'm concerned about, is what words are doing to relationships and to like literal on the ground realities, like starting additional foreign wars, or like putting children in detention, or separating families, or leaving crops to rot in the fields and all that. So what do you believe about the power of words?
I mean, incredibly powerful.
Why?
And the thing is, it's because they are they're how we do things. They're how we communicate thoughts. And I think linguists really fixate on how I communicate like declarative thoughts, like facts and whatever. But it's how we communicate anything, including like coercion, including persuasion, including like making material changes in the world. Like if you're sentenced to 20 years in prison, that's through words. If you're married, that's through words. If a ship is christened, that's through words. Like it is the way that our world functions. It's the underlying code of how our world is built and works.
Why do you think that is? Why is it built that way?
Oh man, that's a deeply philosophical question.
Metaphysical question.
That's a metaphysical question. Yeah. And I have a sort of different views about the literalness of talking about words in a more metaphysical sense, but
I mean, I'm down to hear them if you want to share them, and if not, that's cool. We'll move on.
They're like not fully formed.
Okay.
It's like string theory and like, I don't know, it's vibrations. Basically, I worked as a musician for a long time. I still play, and for me, people are like, how does that work with language? I'm like, it's vibrations. It's all vibrations. Okay. It's infinite diversity and infinite combinations of vibrations. And then I start sounding very much like some of the guys at the barbershop here in Harlem that I'm like, maybe we don't necessarily, we're not on the same wavelength, but I start sounding
the
a lot
same
like
vibrations.
That. Yeah.
There's a novel by Algernon Blackwood, who was a practicing ceremonial magician. It's called The Human Chord. And in it, the main magician believes that the entirety of reality is made up of vibrations, musical vibrations. And so he gets these 3 disciples, and he's going to train them to each sing one of the 4 primal notes of the chord at the heart of reality. So he gets it, he gets a soprano, an alto, a tenor, and he's the bass. Yeah. But he has to like initiate them into magical practice too. It's not just like, here, sing this note. It's a whole ritual. It's a whole enlightenment, because it has to be, like you were saying earlier, it's not just ideas, it's praxis, but it's not just praxis, it's embodiment, and it's living through it. And so eventually he's got all these like resonant things set up in his house and all that. And eventually they're going to sing this chord and it's going to give him power to control
Mm.
reality. What could
So
possibly
he's
go
got the
wrong?
glove, like the Infinity
Yeah.
Gauntlet.
Yes,
And the thing is,
exactly.
I was thinking about this. There's sort of an uncomfortable overlap between like the music of the spheres and string theory, which you arrive at very, very different ways.
What?
Right. So it's I think one is we're kind of working out the math and
Okay.
doing some combination of empirical science and theoretical, like how does this play out, does the
Mhm.
math. And the other is just like, like music and that stuff, kind of like we notice things, right? We notice things moving
Mhm.
around and there's cycles, and what else has cycle, like there's sort of a proto science to medieval and early medieval and even
Yes.
before that science, where they're kind of grasping at things, but then they haven't fully built out the scientific method of trying to prove yourself wrong.
Right. Okay, can you go back a couple steps? Tick, tick,
Yeah.
tick. There's an overlap between the music of the spheres and string theory. Can you explain that like to a fifth grader?
Oh
Or
my
even to
gosh.
a 5-year-old?
Yeah. So
Let's back
I
it up.
guess the sort of in antiquity and the medieval period, you have this idea that the universe is these sort of nested spheres that are, I guess they're like grinding on each other as they rotate. I wasn't fully clear on
Well,
that.
they're
And
made of
there's
crystal and they're really smooth. So I think it's more
that's
like when you
one.
run your
Yeah.
finger around a
Yeah.
glass, right?
But there's the idea that there's these resonant frequencies, and
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it affects everything. And there's more to it. I mean, especially within the Jewish tradition, there's the idea that there's no constellation for Israel. So like when people are all into astronomy and not astronomy, astrology.
Astrology. I mean,
Astronomy is fine.
those were the same thing until a certain
They were
point,
the
but
same until they weren't.
yeah.
But it was like, oh, you must be a Capricorn or a Scorpio, or whatever. It's like there's actually this strong tradition within Judaism that like it's fine for you, but there's no constellation for Am Yisrael,
Hmm.
which is its
Huh.
whole own interesting thing.
Yeah.
With string theory, the idea is that, to my understanding, because I'm a linguist and not a quantum physicist, you can go on YouTube and get a primer on this, but the idea is that they're trying to solve problems that existed with the standard theory and of like how the universe works. And one mathematical approach was to posit a sort of subatomic vibrational kind of particle. And it's like you have this concept of
Right.
either strings or
Right.
loops, and they can be vibrating with a particular frequency, and there's a certain number of dimensions to it. And dimensions, like, we get fixated on like time and space and all this stuff, but it's I mean, it's like columns in a spreadsheet. How many do you need to be able to actually describe the motion of something? And so they kind of work it out. There's some different number of them, which is contentious. I think right now there's somewhere between like 10 and 27, depending on which flavor of string theory you like. But the idea is that a lot of the math works out in terms of vibrating subatomic strings
Hmm.
as the smallest possible unit of study at the moment. And it does things that make better predictions about like gravity, for instance, than the existing
Yeah.
theory, which had to like kind of suggested the existence of gravitons, but they didn't really work with the math, and you got these sort of divide by zero issues, and it kind of cleans those up. But from a sort of poetic perspective, you're looking at
Yeah.
this as like it's vibrations and multiple dimensions. It's like it's a 27 stringed lute, that's
Yeah.
like
It's
with
like
circular strings that are all like, so
the medievals were
it's
right.
yeah. And this
Bring
might just
back.
be that I know just enough about it to be dangerous and not enough to understand the math in a serious way where I can know how wrong I am.
But to make it really pretty and poetic.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that was absolutely fascinating. Do you study or practice Kabbalah at all?
I don't. I find it very woo woo. This is not to offend any any Hasidic listeners or anything, but it's. I mean, from a modern Orthodox background, that's kind of historically the grows out of the opponents of that whole
Yeah.
kind of movement.
Yeah.
That said,
Mystical
there's a lot of
tradition.
overlap where there's people who are like really into it, and then there's definitely some overlap in terms of like the poetry or some of the traditional reasons for doing things where everybody does stuff and it's because of this sort of Kabbalistic kind of reasoning where we like the
Mhm.
poetry of it. So
Well, and what you were just saying sounded to me
yeah.
like it could harmonize with some of the practices of Kabbalah. Now, I'm familiar with the 20th century occult appropriation of the late
The
Renaissance
Madonna,
Christian appropriation.
the
No, no,
Madonna
no,
Kabbalah.
no, 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 not the
No, okay.
Madonna, the W.B. Yeats,
Oh yeah,
the William Butler,
Yates.
the Golden Dawn
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there, for them, the universe is a series of emanations from the primal light,
Yeah.
and they are in harmony with one another. And then you get into gematria, where the words have the numerical values,
Yeah.
and you add them up and you meditate on them. But by meditating on these numerical letters / sounds, you can get at the heart of reality.
Yeah. There are people who really like that. I actually have a book that I really enjoy. I picked up a while back called Gematria Refigured. I think Refigured. And it's kind of making this argument of like, there is a time and a place and a way to do this, but you can play like games with numbers and letters as much as you want, but that's not actually how we do this, like, seriously. And he's really trying to limit it. Like, this is what is acceptable, and there's all this other stuff that can be fun, but like, it's fine for sort of a conversation over the Shabbos table, but it's not really, like, you shouldn't be deriving like rulings about Jewish law based on your own amateur gematria.
Right. Oh, that's very important.
It's
to kind of try to get to the core of what we are dancing around here, mixed metaphor.
What if it's 22 strings? I don't know. Like,
what if it's 72 though?
Yeah.
Or what if it's 4?
But see, that's the problem with this. If it's 4, then you say, oh, it's the letters in the name. Or if you say it's 22, that's the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Or if you say it's 72, then it's the divine names. So you can always find something. If it's 18, then it's Chai. And it's like, it feels very uncomfortably, like, for me, it feels very uncomfortably like you can always find a way to play the game. So, which can be fun.
What I'm trying to push is the universe structured this way, not only because God made it that way, but because there might be something about the name of God that kind of animates all of these fundamental vibrations, and that's why words do what they do?
I think that's a really, really profound question.
Well, thank you for letting me go there, because I've been kind of trying to get there with all my guests. And
let's say I get rabbinic ordination, maybe I'll get an answer for you after that, or maybe I'll just ask you a better question in return. But
okay. Yeah, probably
a good follow-up question.
Likely.
The most likely. But I think it's an interesting thought. I think it's a kind of a beautiful thought. I think the question too is whether the names. I mean, the question is, what is a name and who is it for?
Right.
Are these names for us? Are these names an inherent property of existence of that which exists?
Right.
And so those are kind of different things. And I've been thinking about this because I think recently one of the recent parshas, so we read the Torah every year in these portions, which are called parshas, which sounds close to portions. So it's very easy to kind
which
of remember.
Which is probably just an etymological coincidence, but
yeah, cool. I think it is. But there's this, like, I was known to your ancestors as this, but I will tell you, I am, like, this is my real name. Yes. And there's the question is, like, there's a lot about, like, there's this idea that the Torah speaks in the language of man, right? So that's a very important concept in Jewish law. And so the question is, like, are these for us, right? Is this are we reading too much into it, right? There's the ineffable name that can only be uttered once a year by the high priest in the temple, which no longer exists. It's gone. It's lost. We don't know how to say it. We wouldn't say it if we could. But the question is, like, is that sort of tapping into this kind of deeper reality, which I think there's a strong support for that belief within the sort of belief system of traditional Judaism? Or the question is also, like, these names, they're to facilitate our understanding of how the universe works as we kind of
are they an accommodation?
Yeah. Are they a reasonable accommodation for our like abilities? The other thing, which I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's the command to remember the Sabbath. There's the command to keep the Sabbath. So Shamar v'Zachar, I can put them in a different order. There's a very famous poem that's a Kabbalistic poem that's read on Friday nights, which talks about how they were uttered simultaneously. So within the Jewish tradition, the idea is that as this command was given, all of the assembled people heard both simultaneously as the same utterance. Because if you're not corporeal, if you're not bound by time and human bodies and all this, like why wouldn't that be how you could communicate, even limiting yourself in human language? So it's kind of a beautiful idea. I always like that sort of duality of like simultaneous dual processing that's verbal, like they heard the words, but also nonverbal and in a very profound sense, because it's not, pulmonary respiration and like our speech organs flapping and all that stuff.
It's not limited by our vocal cords.
Yeah.
And if it was maybe communicated directly into the comprehension of the listeners, it maybe didn't have to depend upon
the text is very clear about there being sound, right? But what is sound now? Or is that right? Like, you're getting into like these questions of like, is it external observable reality?
We can hear two sounds at once. We can hear two instruments playing. We can hear two voices speaking. And
but also
not exactly like Data the Android that we can listen to 6 pieces of music at once. And,
Data.
Data. Well, okay. So if any of this is accurate, if the universe is fundamentally built of vibrations, sounds, words, and if this has something to do with the nature of God and his ineffable name and all that, then it really, really matters how we use words. And the words that we use to define each other, and the words that we use to dehumanize each other, or the ways that we weaponize them. Yes?
Yeah. Maybe I should go edit some of my scripts that I'm working on to better reflect that. It's hard down here in the day-to-day.
Oh, yeah. Well, just to run with that for a minute, like what would you then do yourself, or what would you recommend other people to do as far as the ways we use words, if they're that important?
That is great.
Should we do or not do?
So I could tell you what I'm trying to do, and
yes,
I don't know what I can say as far as what other people should do. I've been studying. There's a tradition. So if within the Jewish tradition, if you wrote a book, a lot of times you're referred to by like your book. So instead of saying like, oh, there's Shakespeare wrote yada yada yada, like this is Shakespeare, and we're talking about Macbeth, you would say like the Macbeth brings a poem, and it might be like his sonnet or whatever else. There's the Chafetz Chaim and he's named. He has an actual name, but that's what he's.
So it's a metonym where you refer to the person by their creation,
by their like really good book, right? The Chafetz Chaim wrote more than the Chafetz Chaim, but that's what he's sort of known as.
Okay, hashtag life goals, like
right.
Seriously.
To be known as your book, and so he's got something on Lashon Hara, which is evil speech, and Rechilus, which is like gossip, and it's just kind of digging into how you think about what constitutes doing acceptable things with words, what constitutes harming other people, because the harm once done can't be undone, and that's really, really difficult. There's this story about a man who was gossiping all over town, and he said a bunch of things that weren't true, and he goes to this Hasidic master, and this is where there's this overlap with different traditions, right? But he goes to this master and he says, what can I do? And he says, oh, take a goose down stuffed pillow and take it up to the top of the mountain, and I want you to cut it open and scatter all the feathers to the wind. He says, okay. So he goes off and he does this, and he comes back. He says, I scattered all the feathers to the wind on the top of the mountain. Am I absolved of all my gossip or whatever? He says, okay, now go pick them all up.
Them.
Right? Go gather them all up. And he goes, that's impossible. He says, there you go. So I always love that story. I'm also terrified by it. And I think especially now with like the new YouTube channel, like even on a podcast right now, I try to think about what I can do that will challenge people's perspectives, that will encourage empirical and rational thinking, that will encourage thinking carefully about how we treat one another. I don't always hit that mark, and I feel pretty bad about it when I don't. I feel fantastic when I get comments that are like, this really helped, how I view this. Or like I had a thing about pronouns, and I thought I was concerned about cancellation, right? And I instead have all these comments from trans people who are like, thank you for speaking sense about this, even when other people are speaking for them, saying that I'm wrong. So I try to think about the impact. It's hard. It's very, very hard to do. And then the other thing is repair. I think a lot gets said about, doing the right thing, but we don't spend as much time thinking about when we inevitably mess up. How do we repair? There are things that we can't repair. So it might be worth really trying to stay away from those things. And there are other things where it's like, I need to clarify what I said, or I'm so sorry that had that impact. What I was trying to say was this, or not even what I was trying to say is this, but I recognize that impact, like really listening to people, doing active listening and sort of repentance and repair. Now, all of this comes from my sort of cultural and religious perspective. And so I'm very, as a proud American, I'm also very wary of like imposing that on anybody else, because I'm bought in, like all in on freedom of religion, and I do not want to tell you how you should, think or believe or behave. But hopefully, especially even with a sort of secular perspective on things, I can offer something that's, if it's useful to people and spreads a little bit more kindness, a little bit more careful attention to words, then hopefully that's
seems like it might be a happier and healthier culture if
I'm trying to be happier and healthier.
Yes.
Cultivate that with everybody around me as much as I can.
And one thing I've been writing and talking about a lot recently is that there seems to be a death of pluralism, that there seems to be so much more like, I need to impose my little totalitarianism on everybody else, rather than what you've just said, which is what giving people that freedom.
So the consulting firm that I work with did a lot of work with the federal government right up until January 22nd, 2025, when there was an executive order about DEI, which was not necessarily what we did, and definitely not the stereotype of DEI. But one of the things that we've been kind of toying with is just saying, like, what were we actually doing? And what we were doing was pluralism. What we were doing was e pluribus unum, right? Which even, the current Secretary of Defense has said, or tried to say, on multiple occasions, is like the guiding principle. And so I think there's something to be said for pluralism, and for maybe a patient pluralism, right? Of really trying to hear people out, rather than putting each other in these boxes and then repeating our thought-terminating clichés at each other until we have a fist fight. Right?
and pluralism is hard work. It's terribly hard work, and it's work that's never, ever, ever done. It's a constant negotiation, conversation, discussion of, well, but where are the lines of what's unacceptable? Where are the lines of what's allowed in a civilized society? And everybody has decided only my thing is what's allowed in a civilized society, and anything else is totally unacceptable. So that's tough. Well, why don't we move into a speed round here with a few more definitions. Now, you've had a heavier load of defining than most of my guests, because I already asked you all those other undefinable terms. But I'll do a few that some of my other guests have done, and we'll throw a couple others in there. Okay. So
this is Dr. quick Jones. Definitions, right? This is not this philosophizing, is pontificating. Okay.
Dr. Jones, what is truth?
I think the truth is something that is actually external and observable and real. This is taking a strong metaphysical stance, but I think that truth exists out there somehow.
So then what are facts? Are they different?
I think facts would have to be pieces of information that we have gathered or hold that conform to the truth.
Okay. What is a human?
Homo sapiens sapiens, possibly Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, and we draw a line somewhere around Australopithecus, I think.
Whoa, that was way more scientific than I've gotten. I love that. Okay, what is racism?
Racism, different definitions. Some people count any sort of prejudice of just disliking a person based on perceived characteristics, but racism, a lot of people like the definition that it is prejudice plus some sort of hegemonic power. So the ability to prevent you from, say, studying at a university or living in a particular neighborhood. Whereas I think colloquially, racism is, I don't like you people, whoever the you people is.
Okay. Which suggests that it could also include sexism and other types of prejudice as well. They're not ethnically
based. Yeah, the isms are all...
and
they're all interrelated.
It could be language-based, right? There are certain
for sure. And language is recruited to do the work of racism now in a very interesting way. That's a lot of the sort of courtroom stuff that I do, where people like can use language. What they're really trying to get at is race.
Okay. Oh man.
Even if race is not scientifically, biologically, empirically valid.
Race is socially constructed in the 1300s. Yes.
About 1392. Yeah.
Approximately.
More or less.
On a Wednesday in March.
Yeah.
What is propaganda?
I'm sure there's a very specific definition of this, but the way that I think about it is just trying to manipulate, coerce, or persuade others to believe something for political reasons in order to like take political action.
Okay. And finally, so you said that you are one of the world's 5 experts on the N-word.
Mhm.
What is the N-word? I don't mean what are we substituting for?
Yeah.
If you need to say it, I'll just mark the episode explicit.
I'm not going to say it because I'm the only one of the 5 who looks the way that I do, and I also know that there's only certain contexts in which that is acceptable or appreciated.
Yeah.
The real answer is that I have a paper that was published in a special issue on American speech with a co-author of mine that argues that when people think about the N-word, there's the slur in sort of standard classroom English, and there's about 12 other N-words that are used in Black English that do a wide range of things, including social distancing, honorifics, and in some cases, first-person pronouns. So it really matters what language variety you're speaking about and who's speaking in what context and what they're trying to communicate. I was deposed a few years ago for a case where a guy was fired for having uttered a slur. He was an aspiring rapper. He did this outside of his work hours, and he had a song where he said, "My pocket stands full, going to take all my to the Super Bowl." And they said, this is a slur. We have a 0 tolerance policy. He lost his job. He was in danger of losing his home. Ended up having a big settlement, but part of it was discussing like, what does this mean? Who is he referring? What's the referent? What's the connotation? What's the denotation?
Yes.
We just run down what is he actually doing with language here, and it's very, very clear that he's talking about friends.
My brain immediately said friends in that blank. My friends, my buddies. My guys,
well, that was one of the things we talked about is a substitution test. Like, how does this sentence still make sense? It's going to take all my enemies to the Super Bowl.
Right.
You can make it make sense, but it takes a lot of work.
People that I am prejudiced against, that I wish were socially disenfranchised to the Super Bowl, probably not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. You said first person pronoun. That's one of the uses.
If you have
third person as well, right?
Third person, but it's a little bit more different. So first person, we argue that first person is actually grammaticalizing, and you have before it, all one word though.
Okay.
And you might have that followed by like hungry. For comedic effect, I know people who sometimes use neighbor, like Fred Rogers. So they'd be like, a neighbor hungry, right? That means I'm hungry. Right. And this is actually really, really important stuff because it can be interesting, it can be fun, but then when you have court transcriptionists who don't feel comfortable typing the N-word, when they change it, they might change it to he's hungry, or he's there, or he's usually there, or he's not there, or whatever. Like they'll kind of make some changes.
And so they totally misunderstood which pronoun it is, and then therefore the antecedent of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, it usually is. I think it functions. It usually is the antecedent when it's used with other pronouns. So like, we had a couple of examples where it licenses use of like me or myself. And that's like the smoking gun in linguistics. Is like it's licensing myself. That's
can you explain what that means? Licensing?
Yeah, it'd be like licensing would be like you have a sentence and it's grammatical, and you have this word that appears. So myself only makes sense if it's following a first person singular pronoun.
Yep. Okay.
Like I saw myself. Right.
Yeah. So neighbor in that context couldn't mean he, because it wouldn't be.
If you said he saw myself, it doesn't work.
Right. Well, there is an Irish colloquialism, though, to use the reflexive pronoun in a non-reflexive context, though.
Yeah, and there's cross-linguistically, there's a lot of...
Did you see himself? Was that himself? My Irish husband uses that construction.
No, that's great.
Was that himself on the phone?
And it may be, there's some interesting overlap with Irish and Scottish and non-standard Englishes that were present in the American South for hundreds of years, that can come into play in the sort of linguistic development of Black English, which opens up a whole can of worms.
Well, that is a massive history there. Oh, there's such a history there. Yeah, Irish people displaced because of the famine, moved to the American South, become the plantation owners, become the slaveholders, and then there's linguistic influence. Yeah.
or not. It's hard to say. I mean, that's highly contentious. So there's some who argue that it's all West African grammatical substrate. There's some who argue that it's all non-standard Englishes that have this effect. There's some that argue that it's both. There's some that argue that it's neither.
Yeah.
Linguistics is very contentious. And this is something where we can't actually know because we just don't have the documentation, and the documentation we have is heavily biased.
Well, because a lot of this is just oral.
It's oral, it's racist. It's like when it's written down by a white guy who says, uses a different N-word, but says, they say this here and it's wrong for these reasons. Right. Or it's, I really like these people and this is how they told me their Uncle Remus stories and I wrote it down phonetically. But is that accurate? Is that informed by minstrelsy? Is that, how does it line up with other attestations from enslaved or formerly enslaved people who then have an orientation towards academic writings? Like Frederick Douglass is not writing the way that we are reading, other people from the same place in the same time, written by, and I'm blanking on who wrote the Chandler, who wrote the Uncle Remus stories. Yeah. So it's very, very hard to tease apart what's actually going on. And even like Zorianna Hurston has a book, Barakun, where she interviews this guy. She's writing an I dialect. So the only thing I can tell you for sure is that she's intentionally changing the spelling of some words that doesn't change the pronunciation at all in a way that reflects poorly on this speaker, and distances her as the anthropologist, right, from the speaker. And people say, oh, it's this beautiful, window into Black speech in the time done by a Black scholar. It's like, yes, but yes. And it's hard to tell, what part of this is doing some sort of social academic work for her in the 1920s and what is an accurate representation and where there are inaccuracies that line up. This is something I did not publish on because that the conference talks alone I'd be tarred and feathered and run out of town for for saying that somebody like Zorianna Hurston or Alice Walker might have done something anti-Black, whether intentionally or not, or for justified reasons in their life in that time and place.
But we will say it on YouTube. And maybe we need to go back to some bicycle riding linguists who can get down to taking some handwritten records on all this stuff.
Baguettes and cheese on a bicycle.
Seriously.
For a decade, asking people to say words. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, thank you very much, Taylor. This has been utterly delightful. We could go on and on and on, and I'd love to have you back on again.
I'll do it. Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Fabulous. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Words Do Things. I hope you come back next week for more ideas and discussion. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, share, and review. If you have suggestions, you can find me on social media. I'm Dr. Sorina Higgins on most platforms. Thanks to my project coordinator, Sophia Holcomb, to the anonymous musician who provided me with 2 arrangements of Talk Don't Bother Me by Ray Charles, to all my guests and to each of you for joining the conversation. Whatever you say today, remember, words do things. What do you want them to do?